you're only having comfortable conversations in life, it means you're not talking to everyone you should be talking to. And I talk about that within politics too. If you're only having comfortable political conversations with people, it means you're not talking to everyone you need to. So I like a certain amount of discomfort in my life. It keeps me on my toes. It lets me know that I'm pushing myself. I never want to just settle. Comfort was never the American dream for my family. It was about achieving something, about justice, about service. If people are trying to figure out how to make themselves take some risks more here and there, you can't just hone it in a professional sense. Go into like leadership trainings and whatnot, like that'll only get you so far.
Have you ever noticed that some of the best ideas come from unexpected places? Your next breakthrough may come from a leader facing similar challenges, but in a completely different sector. Welcome to Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop. Join us as we explore how today's successful leaders inspire, influence, and connect with others. Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver and the Communications Board, who have teamed up to spotlight how great leaders and communicators are making their impact in the world. This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs, ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. As a proud GW graduate myself, I can attest that faculty members combine academic rigor with real-world lessons that can't always be found in textbooks. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information. I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest, Congressman Andy Kim. Andy Kim is a U.S. representative for the 3rd Congressional District of New Jersey. He's currently campaigning for the United States Senate with a mission to restore the people of New Jersey's trust in their representatives and government. I've known Andy Kim for more than a decade, and here are 3 things I think you should know about him. Number 1, Andy has worked as a career public servant under both Democrats and Republicans. This includes having served at the Pentagon, the State Department, the White House National Security Council, and in Afghanistan as an advisor to the U.S. military. Number 2, as the son of Korean immigrants, Andy is the first Democratic member of Congress of Korean descent. And number 3, Andy's favorite job is being a dad to his sons, Austin and August. Andy, you've been called many things: a Rhodes Scholar, a Truman Scholar, Congressman, VFW Legislator of the Year, U.S. Senate candidate, dad. Today, we're thrilled to call you Chief Influencer. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're really excited to dive in. First of all, you're in the midst of a Senate campaign, so we're so grateful you made time for us today. And we'll talk about the campaign in a minute. For those who want to learn more, check out andykim.com. But since this show is about influence, I think it's appropriate to start with a big victory you recently had that will have ripple effects for time to come. Can you explain what the county line is in New Jersey for those of us who aren't familiar, and why you fought to eliminate it?
Sure. So New Jersey is just about the last bastion of political machine left in America, and the biggest part of it that has influence there on the side of the machine is that they can affect how the ballot looks. So 49 other states use what's called an office block ballot. It's just traditional. You have the, running for Senate, all the candidates below. In New Jersey, party leaders can actually give preferential placement for their endorsed candidates, so they can give an advantage to someone on the actual ballot, which is kind of just crazy to think about and completely unfair in my opinion. So this is something that I decided that I would file a lawsuit about to try to change. And I think for me, it's a recognition that this isn't just about me and my Senate race here in 2024. This just needs to be fixed, especially as I'm someone who is a member of the Democratic Party that constantly espouses the need to be able to protect our democracy, about fairness and equality in this nation. And I believe that we need to hold true to those values no matter what, and especially to make sure we're not being inconsistent and taking those advantages if they benefit us. We need to show that we're being consistent across the board.
I think it's so many of us, I think, have been surprised to even learn this existed if we're not, from New Jersey and have never voted in New Jersey. And obviously, it must have been uncomfortable to stick your neck out and go against the the system on this. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah, it was uncomfortable. I mean, this whole Senate race has been a challenge. I mean, it started with, me stepping up against my senior senator from my state, who is a member of my, Democratic Party. I stepped up to run against Senator Bob Menendez after his recent indictment. And so that was a challenge. And then I ended up having my main competitor be the sitting first lady of New Jersey, the wife of the sitting governor of New Jersey from my own party, and then now taking legal action against again leaders of my own party when I think that they're doing something wrong. So the entire thing has been uncomfortable in that kind of way. But again, look, I swear my oath to the Constitution, not to a political party. I'm somebody that very much believes that our democracy is very much at stake right now. I mean, these are scary times in the world, and for us to try to navigate that, we have to show that we are part of something bigger than all of us, and try to do our best to fix it. So, yeah, it's been a challenge, and it has strained relationships and made things very difficult at times. But I always felt like I was guided by doing what's right. My job is not to just maintain good relations with everybody. It's to deliver what I think is best for our democracy and for the people. And that's what I'll keep trying to do.
Well, it's really impressive what you're doing. I want to go back in time a few years to January 6th, 2021. And for those who don't know, your photograph went viral the day after the attacks on the U.S. Capitol. And more than that, many of us were truly inspired by what we saw. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, I mean, we all know the horrible events of that day, but what you're referring to is, after the riot had been quelled, we came back into the Capitol, and as I was walking around the Capitol, I was just, literally heartbroken seeing such a beautiful building, just damaged and desecrated. And in particular, when I got to the rotunda, which I believe to be the most beautiful building in America, sorry, most beautiful room in America, I couldn't stand it anymore. So I just kind of by instinct decided to just start cleaning up the rotunda. I cleaned up, every single piece of garbage and debris that I could in the rotunda, and then just continued on across the Capitol. I did it for maybe about an hour and a half to 2 hours. I didn't realize I was being photographed. A photographer took a picture of me cleaning the rotunda and cleaning parts of the Capitol. And, the photographs circulated widely, went viral. And so, look, it was, again, I didn't realize I was being photographed, but I think in some ways that's why the photographs had some power. I think people, on a day when they just saw some of the worst images of our democracy, people literally, again, damaging and desecrating, this beautiful temple of our democracy. I think it was powerful for people to just see someone trying to respect that building, someone trying to honor that building. And the way I often think about it is like, that the Capitol building is literally the physical manifestation of Article 1 of the Constitution. And my job is to, protect and defend the Constitution. So I have to protect and defend and honor that building. And so that's, so my parents, brought me to the Capitol when I was a kid. I'm a son of immigrants. My parents brought me there and taught me to love that building, taught me to respect and honor that building. So I think that's why I ended up doing it that day.
I think for those of us who knew you before you were ever in elected office, we weren't surprised by that. But so many other Americans and people around the world got to know you a little bit through that moment. What sort of a reaction did you get? What did you hear from folks who saw that photo?
Yeah, I mean, I got thousands of handwritten cards and letters from people all over the country. Many of them had never heard of me before. That was the first time they'd ever heard or seen about me. But they felt so moved. I remember one telling me about how it reminded her of her immigrant mom, and how much her mom tried to take care of this country and would clean up the parks around their house. And it was interesting, just people feeling that sense of needing to share, especially after such a traumatic day for our democracy. And still to this day, I mean, just the other day, I had someone literally stop me on the street to tell me about that photograph, and they got teary eyed just talking to me. What I always say though is like, look, it's a some ways been a weird experience because like what I did, it was not heroic. What I did was ordinary. I would hope that any American would do what I did. But I do recognize that, it was important for people to be reminded that there still is something called public service, that decency and character do matter in this time of age where we see so much toxicity and so much just anger and hatred in our politics. And I think it was important to show that, like, leadership isn't just about screaming and yelling on the floor of the House of Representatives or, knife fighting on Twitter, but that, it's about service and it's just about making sure that we're doing what we can.
I mean, hard to imagine a better picture to represent servant leadership than that one. And I think so many who saw it, they all thought in a tough time, what are each of us doing to make a difference? So definitely not surprised that it struck a chord and you heard from so many people. Definitely my experience as well. Well, I want to ask you, just as government leaders like you are dealing with polarization in the world right now, so are leaders in business, leaders of nonprofits, from employees to the communities they serve. I wonder what advice you have for how leaders can show up and engage in today's climate.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm still learning this as well, but I think what you said is a place to start, which is you have to show up. You actually have to engage, and that's something that I think in politics feels so distant. People feel very distant and removed from their politics. They think democracy just exists down in the DC, and that's where our government is, and that they're being ignored by their political leaders who are more interested in chasing their own ego and their ambition rather than engaging with them. And I can imagine that, look, that's issue of proximity is going to be there no matter what the organization is, even if it's a small business, even if it's a small organization. That sense of proximity, like are the leaders of this organization paying attention to what we're doing? Are they respecting what we're doing? Are they understanding our role? And so that just requires that interaction, that accessibility. And that's something for me. Like, I've now done 73 town halls as a member of Congress in a little over 5 years. I find these to be incredibly important. And there's one town hall that I did in the deep Republican part of my district, and I remember when I took every question. I stood before them and said, whether you voted for me or not, you're my boss, and my job is to serve you. And at the end, there was a long line of people. Older gentleman waited 45 minutes to come up to me. And when he did, he looked at me and he said, I just want you to know I didn't vote for you. And I was a little taken aback. I said, okay. And then he said, and I was very hesitant to come to this town hall today. But then he put out his hand, shook my hand and said, but I'm glad I did, and shook my hand and walked off. And like, look, like I don't necessarily think I earned that man's vote just for showing up and taking some tough questions, but I do think I earned his respect. And I think that sense, respect comes from the fact that I showed up in his town. I showed him respect. I listened to every question. I didn't demean anybody. I gave them equal time. I gave them thoughtful responses, even if it meant I disagreed vehemently. And so I think that's so much of what we're missing right now. And I imagine that sense of respect, that sense of accessibility, and that sense of just listening to people can be important leadership traits, no matter what industry sector, no matter what style or shape of organization. We're missing a lot of that right now. And that's what I think our society needs.
Yeah. You mentioned, showing up in person, those 73 town halls, and obviously all kinds of other events. You also post on social media accounts yourself. And I want to ask kind of your thoughts about kind of showing up in the digital age. Do you think it's important for leaders to have access to their own accounts? And can you talk about your approach?
Yeah. I'll be honest with you, it took me a little while to kind of find a voice. And you do need to kind of find an authentic voice online. I come from the national security world, so I was not allowed to have social media accounts when I worked previously in government. So this is still pretty new, but Um, I think for me, yes. I mean, it's more than just conveying information. It's about giving a sense of who you are, and I think right now, again, there's so much distrust in government right now, so much distrust in politicians. So there's just this initial skepticism that you have to break through. Like people just assume that someone else is doing your social media, that this is all just kind of like highly orchestrated stuff. And what I found that is both true to who I am and how I write and how I express myself, but also what people are interested in is when I can show a sense of rawness, just a sense of honesty or earnestness. And not everyone's going to believe it or recognize it, and I get that. But whether it's about just how I write, like when I like how I write statements, well, not even statements because that sounds too formal, but just like how I try to convey words. It's different than a press release, and that's something that I had to really learn and hone. Um, and also, like, the way I sort of describe it is like I'm a storyteller. I try to tell stories, whether that's my stump speech or social media. And when you tell stories, it's very powerful to tell personal stories. Be able to share that with people, give them a sense of like who you are and what motivates you, what pushes you. And a lot of that is, also about my family, my kids, because they're what motivates me. So I often, I hesitated to write or talk about my kids, but I realized that like people won't understand who I am if I don't talk about them or share my deep love for them or how silly they are and how happy that makes me feel. Like a person will just not understand the core of why I do my politics. Like I do this for my kids. Like me being in Congress, this is my way of trying to be a good dad to like fix the broken world that they're growing up in, fix the healthcare, the education, the other things that I want them to have. So if they don't understand what it means for me to be a dad, then they just simply won't understand who I am or why I do what I do. I think that was an important realization for me.
I think that's a great lesson for all leaders, because I think, today you do have to show up both in person and digitally, but
Yeah.
finding that voice, you can't just replicate what somebody else is doing. It won't work for you. And so it's I think good to hear that it's been a journey for you to find your voice and that everyone has to take the time to do that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's just people can tell when you're just giving them talking points, whether that's online or in a stump speech or whatnot. Like they can tell that. Like you got to give the voters more credit, and they're smarter than often the political world sees them as, and they can tell when someone's just a politician just spouting out lines that someone else wrote for them. They can literally tell by the way you talk, the way you inflect, the way you engage, and they don't like that. And now more than ever. And so, I think, perhaps the scarcest commodity that there is in politics is authenticity and genuineness, rawness. But that is actually what is craved right now. People want to get a sense of who you are as an actual person.
You talked about the importance of, excuse me, storytelling. And one of the things I've heard you talk about a lot is, your family story and how your parents have inspired you. So I wondered if you could share a bit about that.
Yeah, I look, I'm a son of immigrants. It was actually 50 years ago that my parents immigrated to this country. They both had a tough childhood. Like, my dad suffered from polio as a child. Really lived in harsh conditions. My mom grew up to a poor farm family, to a single mom. But here in America, they got so much opportunity. My dad ended up getting a PhD in genetics here in America. My mom ended up getting a nursing degree, served the hospital systems of New Jersey. Like they no, I think about the courage that they had 50 years ago. Like they didn't know anybody in America, like not a single person. But they came here like from halfway around the world. Like it's just like, I don't know, like that's a lot of courage. And I can't imagine myself necessarily doing things like that. But it just shows you not only the determination that my parents had, but it also shows you like how much America meant to them. And I think that that's something that I feel hopeful about and I want to be reminded of, that like America was and still is, despite our flaws, despite our challenges, we still are a country where people want to come to, that they believe in the idea of America. They believe in the values. And sure, we don't always live up to them. We never have. And frankly, we never will. That's the whole point of a more perfect union, right? We pursue it, but we know it's never something where we just say, okay, now we're perfect. Like we always try to engage. Um, and so like I want people to like be reminded of that beauty and recognize that like my story, my family story is not just a Korean American story or an Asian American story. It's fundamentally an American story. And when I tell my story with my parents, so many people come up to me and say they tell me their story of their parents or of themselves or their grandparents, whatnot. And it's about finding those threads that cut across all of us. No, it's never going to be identical, but there are themes, there are values, there are different components. And right now, we feel like we lose touch with that because we live in a society where the stories that are being told are mostly divisive. And it's stories about how we're coming apart. And I think what I'm trying to do is show, like, no, like, remember, we're still part of something bigger than all of us. There are still these common threads that are strong and vibrant. It's just that so often we focus on the wrong American stories. It doesn't mean we ignore them, like the toxicity and the divisions are real and we have to confront them. We cannot ignore it or sweep it under a rug, but nor shall we or should we ignore the strength of the common values that bind us. And I still believe in that. So, the storytelling is important. When you go and listen to someone, a political figure, give a talk, you're not going to necessarily remember every single issue that they raise and what their top three priorities are, but like you'll remember some of the stories. You'll remember how it made you feel. And, I think that that's, something we really need to respect and understand right now. Like, affecting how someone feels about America right now, how they feel about this moment, and how they feel about what comes next. That's important. That's going to be very much on their mind when they go vote. It's going to be very much on their mind when they get a sense of how they feel about you as a political figure. So those are the types of things that I think about when it comes to storytelling, especially when I tell my family story.
One of the things that always comes across when I hear you speak or talk to you is a sense of optimism, and the promise of America, but at the same time, not in such a way that, well, everything will just work out, but that for that to happen, we have to sort of dig in. And you talked earlier about, being willing to confront some tough issues that maybe didn't make you some friends in New Jersey. Your positions haven't always been popular with your peers in Congress either. You don't think members of Congress should be able to trade stock. And that's a position that put you at odds with Nancy Pelosi. So why is that issue important enough for you to disagree with your own party leaders?
Yeah, and that bill to ban members of Congress from trading stocks hasn't made me particularly popular at the cafeteria at the Capitol, but but it's the right thing to do. And I think it kind of gets at this point. Like, we live in the time of the greatest amount of distrust in government in modern American history. Here in my home state, New Jersey, 84% of people here in New Jersey believe that their politicians are corrupt. I think that is a deeply scary place to be as a democracy. Like, how can a democracy function with that much distrust in our government? And you have to recognize, like, it's not just like, sure, like some people can feel like, well, I'm not going to do anything wrong. Like, but like, you have to understand, like, it's not just about you, but it's also about the broader level of just like everyone across politics, but it's also the perception, and perceptions matter. And like, I work a job, like I get to work a job whose job description is in the Constitution of the United States. Like, that is a deeply humbling experience. I'm one of 535 Americans out of 330 million people that get to write federal law. Like, no one's forcing us to do these jobs. Like, and if we're going to do them, we better hold ourselves to the highest level standards. Like, these are not normal jobs. Normal jobs, aren't described in Article 1 of the Constitution. So if like we're going to do this, we have to recognize that, yes, there are going to be some things that we can't do. And like, like when you're in Congress and like we're making decisions that are impacting nearly every industry and sector in America, including every company in America, like you cannot be invested in individual stocks. Like, people cannot have even the slightest, perception that you might be doing this for your own personal benefit rather than what's right for the country. And like, if we're making decisions that are influencing federal contracts of billions of dollars to certain companies, you can't you can have people invested in those sectors, and we're getting classified information and other things. So like, I know it's not going to fix everything, but it does speak to this moment of just distrust that's out there, and why we need, campaign finance reform, gerrymandering, and and I hope what people see and what I'm doing here in New Jersey with trying to change the ballots and fix our elections, like a reform agenda is powerful, not just in New Jersey, but in this country. And I think that it is something that we need to get behind, because we need to restore a sense of trust and integrity. Otherwise, all these other things we want to do become so much more difficult. Like, I can't get the kind of gun violence prevention legislation through unless we can fix the problems of special interest and other problems in our politics. Like, this stuff matters. And that's what I've been trying to show and engage in the work that I've done so far.
Yeah, 100%. So definitely a thread that goes through the decisions that you've made.
Yeah.
You've worked with a number of leaders, from President Barack Obama and National Security Advisor Susan Rice to Generals David Petraeus and John R. Allen. How have some of those leaders influenced your own leadership style?
Yeah. I'll give you one example. I've been in some very, I had the great honor of being able to be in the room for a good number of President Obama's really, some of his toughest decisions in national security. And what I always found interesting is, for instance, in the Situation Room, if it was a particularly tough decision, he would kind of walk on in, and no one would really necessarily know what his position might be on this decision before him. And he would just kind of immediately point to people, make people go around the room and tell him their thoughts. But he was very clear in doing so in a way that didn't tip his hand of like how he might be feeling. And like, I thought that was like, it was powerful to see, especially at the highest of levels, him hearing from his cabinet, wanting that opinion, not coming out and saying things because we know that if the president comes out and says, oh, I might be leaning towards this, like it might influence how people talk to him. So that sense of like, how do you get honest assessments? Like, how do you get like honest assessments from your top team? That was really powerful. And then the other aspect of it, this was something I learned from some of the other leaders, is like how to make a decision. That is arguably, I know it sounds very simple, but it's very difficult for people. And even at the highest of levels, and in fact, sometimes at the highest of levels with the greatest stakes, that's when it becomes all the more difficult. But it's not just how to make a decision, how to make an informed yet timely decision. Because what we've seen so often is that, if you linger too long in making a decision, sometimes the decision is made for you by just changing circumstances. And so that activeness is important. And I think you might see, look, when Menendez got indicted, I made the decision to jump in to run for Senate within 24 hours. It was not because I had decided this beforehand. In fact, I was not planning on running for Senate, but I've been able to kind of hone in my career so far in my life a way where I can make quick decisions that I feel comfortable with if I feel like I hit a certain threshold of both passion and information. And I don't want to make reckless decisions. I want them to be thoughtful and informed, but I do try to push myself to make faster decisions if I feel like that is something that can help, the ultimate outcome. And so like, I do think that there's a bit of importance of understanding risk-taking. Again, not reckless risk-taking, but thoughtful, informed risk-taking. And that's something that often I find it's a challenge in government, especially in a very bureaucratic structure. It's very hard to find places where one can take measured and calculated and thoughtful risks. But I do think it's important. Otherwise, if you're not willing to, sometimes I've just seen decisions kind of wither on the vine, people unwilling to get there unless they feel like it's absolute certainty. But you will never find any tough decision where you have 100% clarity that this is the right decision. At some point, you need to take a risk. And I do think that that's where you can see and separate different qualities of leadership is the ability and willingness of people to make some of those jumps, and how they go about doing it.
Well, along the lines of risk taking, I mean, you're kind of a pro at going up against the odds, aren't you? And I wonder what advice you have for other leaders who might, feel like they're the underdog.
Yeah, I've taken some really big risks. What I would say is that I honed my initial understanding of risk taking not through just work. I did it a lot through like travel. Um, so I'm an avid traveler. I love traveling, and I love traveling in like a non itinerary way. Like I like traveling without necessarily knowing what I'm going to do on each day. And that has allowed me to just kind of, I don't know, feel comfortable being uncomfortable. Like, and that's something that like my parents kind of taught me. They were always saying, like, if you're only having comfortable conversations in life, it means you're not talking to everyone you should be talking to. And I talk about that within politics too. If you're only having comfortable political conversations with people, it means you're not talking to everyone you need to. So, like, I like a certain amount of discomfort in my life. It keeps me on my toes. It lets me know that, I'm pushing myself. I never want to just settle. I never want to just like comfort was never the American dream for my family. It was about achieving something, about justice, about service, about, things like that. Um, so like I would just say like if people are trying to figure out how to make themselves, be able to take some risks more here and there, is you can't just hone it in a professional sense. You go into like leadership trainings and whatnot, like that'll only get you so far. I think we need to find ways to be able to just be comfortable with a certain amount of discomfort. And I'm not saying everyone needs to do that through travel. That was just the means by which I felt I acclimatized to it. But like, how else can people acclimatize to it? What are the other ways in which they can get used to that kind of altitude of decision making that is needed? So I would ask people to just kind of think about that. Like, how do you just kind of build up your acceptance or tolerance, whatever the right word is, for discomfort? Because if you cannot swallow or stand a sense of discomfort, you're never going to take risks. You're never going to be able to put yourself out there and deal with that. So I think that that's probably what I would advise.
Yeah, it's a great lesson for public servants. It's a great lesson for leaders. Along those lines, among your many accolades, you're a recipient of the Harry S. Truman Scholarship, which is how we met. And that's the living memorial to the president and prepares the next generation of public servants. You've also proposed legislation to elevate public service. So I wanted to ask, why is that so important to you?
Well, look, after January 6th, people asked me, like, what are you going to continue to be in Congress? Things are so toxic. Like, and I said, actually, like, I feel recommitted to it after January 6th. And the way I describe it is like, I'm now dedicating the rest of my career, rest of my life to try to solve one singular question, which is how do we heal this country? And I still believe it's possible. It's not, can we heal this country? It's how do we heal this country? Like, I still believe it's possible. And I don't have all the answers. I'm not going to say I've figured out the perfect plan. This is obviously something so complex. But I do believe that part of that answer, and a big part of that answer, is that we need to inspire and ignite a new era of public service. I really do believe we need to move our governance away from partisan politics and reorient it back towards a sense of civic duty, of responsibility, of public service. And that's not easy. You can't just create a new, Kennedy moment of like a call to service. But I do think that that's what we need as a country. So I've introduced a number of pieces of legislation that would, try to create the architecture for a national service plan, and a foundation in this country, and other types of things that we can do, investing and reigniting civics education in a massive way. Like, I want us to try to fight back against this toxicity in politics rather than normalizing it. I just don't want what we have now to be the new normal of our democracy. And I don't think it's sustainable. I don't think that's a sustainable trajectory. So we have to be able to fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, while we're on the subject of President Truman, he's credited with saying, it's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. And people who know you say that throughout your life and your career, you really focused on lifting up others. So I wondered if you could tell us what are some of the things that you've done to earn that reputation?
Um, I don't know. I mean, look, I just think, well, let's say if, like, for instance, with this lawsuit that we're doing right now, sure, I get it. I'm in a lot of the headlines, saying that I'm leading this lawsuit, trying to change New Jersey politics, but a lot of people were in this fight before me, and people that set the ground, people who helped educate me through over the years about these problems that we face, research and academia that prove that this is by quantitative measures unfair, and previous candidates that even tried to take legal action, and I saw that there was possibility there in a legal way. Like, all of that allowed me to be able to play my role, and I think that that's the right way to categorize it. Like, I play a role in a broader movement, but this is not my movement. This is not the something that is derived solely based off of my actions. And so I just, like, if there's one word that I try to associate with the kind of politics I practice, it's humility. Like, we need a lot more humility in our politics. And unfortunately, we see a lot of what the opposite of that is, which is a lot of hubris in our politics. A lot of people who think that they are singularly able to fix America. If only someone made them king or queen for the day, they would fix all the problems. And, like, that's just wrong. Obviously just factually incorrect, but it's also just sends the wrong message to a democracy that is about e pluribus unum, right? Like, it's not about like out of many one does not mean like one person, right? It means a coalescing. It does not mean like a move towards authoritarianism. So I think that that is something that I try to keep in mind, and try to make sure we're lifting up others. Like, my job is to be a coalition builder. And I think coalitions are the heart of what we need to do to be able to build the kind of political community to be able to fight back against so much of the divisiveness that we see right now.
Well, as we wrap up today, I just want to ask you one final question, which should be a pretty easy one to answer. But why are you giving up your seat in Congress to run for the U.S. Senate, and how can people get involved with your campaign or find out?
Well, like, I'm not able to run for re-election, but I'm going to stay in Congress for the rest of this term. But look, it was a risk. It was a risk to put that on the line. But again, it's a matter of this kind of question of where can I be of most impact for this country? And that answer to that question has taken me to war zones, taken me to the White House, taken me to Congress, and now, as a candidate for the U.S. Senate. It's something that I thought about and just felt like, this is something that I can do to be able to shape the kind of world my kids grow up in. Like, I refuse to believe my kids are doomed to grow up in a broken America. And I had to just believe it in my heart. I got no sleep the night before I announced my candidacy for Senate. I just knew that if I didn't do this, I knew that I would probably regret it for the rest of my life. Like, I could just feel it in my heart, and I had to trust my instincts there, as I have at many other points in my life, that that this is something that's meaningful to me. So I hope other people find excitement in what I'm trying to do, then to destroy this machine here in New Jersey, to try to reform our politics in our country, to try to usher in a new era of leadership and public service. I think this country is hungry for a new generation of leadership to step up. And if people are excited about that, I hope they get to go to andykim.com to learn more and help support in whatever way they can. But this is something I'm really excited about, and I hope to get it across the line in the June primary as well as in November. And I'd be honored if I had the chance to be able to serve this nation in the U.S. Senate.
And it may not be comfortable, but you thrive finding those uncomfortable situations. So it's an incredible journey. Andy Kim, Congressman, Senate candidate, now Chief Influencer. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Chief Influencer, a production of Social Driver and the Communications Board. If you know a leader who should be featured as a Chief Influencer, please nominate them at chiefinfluencer.org. For show notes and more, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn. Until next time.